Greetings all. It's Doug again. Thanks for joining me. I picked this spot to do our little intro today for a couple of reasons. One is because we've got this pretty yellow rose behind me, and I'm going to talk to you about the roses a little bit more. The other reason I decided, I hear that bird. He's disturbing my intro right now. I think it's who is that? He's up there on the top of the tree. Well, if you think going to the top of these mountains is tough, you ought to try filming one of these introductions. If the neighbors aren't starting their power motors while I'm trying to tape, then the birds come over. And I like birds, but I'll tell you, if they're not going to come over to the bird bath next to me while I'm doing this, then I think it's just basically pretty rude. So here's what I was going to tell you about this place. Then we're going to head to South Sister. Now I wanted to take this picture like I told you in front of my yellow roses. Well, you look and you say, hey Doug, you got all this screen in front. And that's because when I planted these guys 2 years ago, and that screen goes down there with the other roses. 2 years ago when I planted these nice new roses, I immediately started the battle Elmer Fudd versus Bugs Bunny and all the flea-bitten varmints, because no sooner had I planted those guys than all those guys from the hills, I live in the hills, came down and said, look at the roses. And I've had trouble with rabbits, eat them, squirrels eat them. People don't believe it, but I've seen it. And worst of all, the rats. So I tried everything. I tried the number one thing. My friend who owns a nursery said, no, you got to make up the mystery solution, the secret solution. You make it up of chili pepper and all these different spices, and then you spray it all over the leaves, and those rats and squirrels and all those, they hate it. They won't eat your roses anymore. And so I did that. I did it multiple times. And guess what? The rats and the bunnies and the squirrels all got together, and they left me a note, and it said, thank you. It was delicious. And it broke my heart, because I would come out here in the morning and I'd have a nice rose, and it would be eaten to the stalks. There'd be nothing left except a few sticks. So here's my latest try, the screen. It took me a long time, but I've got them all screened off in the hopes that I can get the plants healthy enough that in the next few years they'll withstand those attacks. You might look, one last thing, people go and say, no, Doug, you use chicken wire. And chicken wire, the holes in the chicken wire, the openings are about the size of a quarter, and as everyone may or may not know, rat can fit through the hole of a quarter. They say, what good does that do, Doug? Well, number one, we're in this pandemic. I can't go to the store and get thinner chicken wire than I already had. But number two, here's my theory. My theory that after eating all my roses, those rats are so fat they can't fit through the chicken wire holes. So we'll see in the future whether this worked or not. So let's take a look where we've come from. If you look down, about mid-screen, right in the middle, right there, you can just see a little piece of Devil's Lake down there, right in front of that big bump. And just beyond that big bump, between the big mountain, the snow-covered mountain on the left, that's Mount Bachelor, and the bump, that's kind of a green spot. And then there's a little lake down there, and we park kind of near that little lake. So we've gone quite a bit. We're almost there. I'm pretty happy. See, we're really close. Do you believe me? Actually, we've still got the hard part to go. And now we're starting to see a little bit of snow. It shouldn't be that much of an issue. But you notice the terrain is starting to change. Just like I talked about, the trees are pretty much gone. It's too hard for them to grow up here. You look at all the boulders and rocks and all that, that makes it pretty hard to find a trail. So you can find different trails going up here. And maybe next year it's gone. It's been wiped out by the winter storms. Maybe, maybe not. So we'll move on our way up. And there we go. You know I'm a sucker for these little flowers. This little guy hiding there went through the long winter, and he made it through okay. Well, there's a little thing of scale. and you can see a couple people up ahead of me. But the thing I want to tell you about, we got to be careful of something right here, don't we? We got to be careful that they don't knock a boulder down on us, because you can see how loose all these boulders are. There's not much holding them on. You could step on one boulder and it'll come tumbling down. So I got to be really careful I don't get clobbered by a boulder, because it doesn't take a very long distance for it to start accelerating quite a bit and do a significant amount of damage to you. But just as important, you've got to make sure that you don't knock over a boulder and have that boulder go down on somebody below you, which would be a terrible thing. But what is the good news? Are you really happy? Because I see the ridge up there. After all this, we finally made it. Well, actually, we haven't. That's the summit way, way, way up there. It's so far up, the people right up there would look like little tiny dots. So we've still got a hard, long way to go. The one thing you can tell for sure is you can see the slope is starting to severely break down on the right-hand side with all that snow. So I hope we don't have to deal with that. And look what's on our right. That little pretty lake. I think it's time for a nice little rest right here. And look who shows up. Well, this guy is clearly begging. I want you to notice those two pairs of racing stripes on his back. And those two pair of racing stripes are the reason he is often mistaken for a chipmunk. This guy is not a chipmunk. This guy is a squirrel. He's a ground squirrel. If he were a chipmunk, he would be even smaller. And as quick as this guy is, the chipmunk would be even quicker. The chipmunk is remarkably quick. This guy is well, let me tell you, you look at a chipmunk would also have those racing stripes go all the way and continue up over his shoulders, across his forehead, through his eyes, all the way to the tip of his nose. That's what a chipmunk would look like. This guy's racing stripes stop right at his neck, where his neck turns kind of an orange gold color, and that's what gives him his name, the golden mantle ground squirrel. So this is a golden mantle ground squirrel, and he's a little pudgier than the squirrel, still very, very quick. And you know what this guy is doing. It's pretty easy to tell what he's doing. He's begging. So I am not going to give him any food. And the reason is, as you know, it's bad to give people food to wild animals. It's not good for them. So I'm doing him a favor. He wasn't too happy about it. In fact, I'm not sure. But as I was leaving and I looked back at him, I could have sworn he was giving me the finger. But anyway, as I continue up, I look, and there on the side is a dog. And this dog was really fun to see, because we're in a national forest, remember. We're in wilderness and a national forest. You're allowed to take your dogs on the trail there. And so there was a nice couple, and they had this dog who they brought up with him. His name was Thornton, and every time he saw a snowbank, he came running around to play on it. As for us, we're trying to get up to the top of this thing. Now you're starting to feel the effects of the very thin oxygen up around 9,000 feet where we are. You can see a guy, if you look at the snowbank on the left, he's at about 7 o'clock. You can see him going up. And then that trail continues on to the right side of that snowbank, goes almost over to the big snowbank on the right, then zigs to the left. You can actually see it way up there, zigging to the left. You see some little tiny dots on that. It's hard to see, so don't feel bad if you can't see it, because I can barely see it, and I've got my glasses on. If you see those little tiny dots on the part of the trail that's stretching to the left, those are people. And look at these guys. Magnificent, the things that nature does. I look at them and I say they're remarkable. Look at what their life is like. Their life is under snow much of the year. Completely under snow. Nope, they're going to stay alive. And yet they come out here. It's still cold. They come out, and look what they're growing out of. They're growing out of all these broken pieces of lava, and still they find a way to survive. Let's look back. Boy, that little lake looks even smaller as we go and look down at it. And then way into the distance, down there near the big flat, kind of not even green, kind of a pale green gray open spot we talked about from a long time ago, is Devil's Lake. That's the other blue one. And then the light blue one in the distance is just beyond where we park. So we've gone quite a bit of distance, but more importantly, like we've talked about, quite a bit of elevation. There's Mount Bachelor in the distance. And around it, all those bumps are all from volcanic activity through the years. As I go up, notice that there's a big drop-off here to the right. And look at that big block of ice, that big crack in it. And it makes you realize how dangerous this area is if you step at the wrong spot. You can go downhill in a big, big hurry. We still got a ways to go. Let's keep moving. Isn't that wonderful? Look at those flowers growing right out of all of that lava debris. And there's one other thing I notice as we go up. Well, let's go a little bit further up. And, well, here's a good example right now. We've gone a long way. We must be near the top. We must be ready to touch it by now. And yet, if you look up at the top and you look and the little snow patch right in the center, up near the horizon line, there's just a little snow patch. Just above it, you see a little white dot. That's actually a person. So we've still got a ways to go. And I'm getting very, very tired. And you look at the ground as we're going up, and you notice things have changed. This is a lot different than it was when we were down at the bottom, isn't it? But you also notice the color has changed. There is a lot of red in this. And we've talked about it before. That red shows us, yep, there's a lot of iron in the ground, and it oxidizes when it gets wet. That would make sense considering all the snow that's up here. It oxidizes, and it's just the same way as when you leave your hammer out in the rain. If you have an iron hammer, it rusts. The ground is rusting. It's turning kind of a reddish orange. I'd call it more red. But a geologist would go and tell you, the mountain is rusting. That's what's happening. Well, I certainly hope this is the top. I really, really do, because I'm really sucking wind right now. I'm really tired. Let's take a look around. A little bit of wind up here. We made it. We've made it to the top of South Sister. And as we look at it right here, this big giant mass in front of us of ice and then rock on the far end, that is the crater. Crater skull covered with ice, and that's the crater rim around the edge. But the thing you notice on that, it's not like the way you would think of it in a TV show or a movie. That crater rim is going up and down and around. It drops pretty low over there on the left. And that's because volcanoes get to do whatever they feel like doing. They're not going to do it like the movies want them to do it. So this volcano goes up and down and up and down. And one of the things I like to talk about is that we've made it here to the rim. And if you make it to the rim of a volcano, you can say, you know what? I summited. And no one is going to argue with you. You've summited. the top mountaineer in the entire world won't argue with you. You summited the mountain. But there's another thing, and that is called true summit, the highest point of the rim, the highest point of the mountain. And sometimes it's fun to go to that point. Now, naturally, that point is on the far side of the volcano. One of the things that I want you to think about for our next leg of our journey, our third show, which way do you want to get to true summit? You want to try and go across the ice? I'm not really sure. You think it's safe? Or do you want to go around on the crater rim? We'll make that decision later. One last thing. You know, it's kind of funny. I get up to the top and I have to confess, this is not the first time that I ever made it up to the top of South Sister. I actually climbed this mountain. I want to say it was about 18 years ago. And actually, I was kind of surprised because one thing did change. I'm sucking wind, and my pulse is no longer going really fast. It's turned into a straight hum. This mountain is much higher than it was the first time I climbed it, and I'm still trying to figure out why that happened. Anyway, we're going to go on our third leg. We're going to explore the top of South Sister. You might think, well, it doesn't look like there's much up there. Believe it or not, there are some beautiful views and some fun stuff. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks.